piece of legislation. Funding to help adults learn to write, read, and write. But just a number of adult things here. And then educational testing. Educators have undoubtedly attempted to measure the assess student learning from the very beginning of formal education. Only the last 60 years have educational assessments taken on vast importance. May feel the assessment a proverbial tail that wags the dog. Educational, especially the recent things for assessments. Increased attention given to testing in the past. This Conant was the guy involved with the SAT. He was real big on standardized testing to compare intelligence levels, and he felt it was a way to assess a student's ability, student's potential to be successful at. Where did he care about? Harvard. He was the president of Harvard. So he wanted these tests given so he could pick out the best ones to come to Harvard, because he thought he could determine chances of succeeding by that. The ETS now is its national service, major power of the education testing movement. By 60, more than 1 million students were taking the SAT. Developed for the past 60 years, faced increasing pressure in recent years to develop improved ways to assess learning. Okay. So you make a comment here. I did the. Here's 13. Here's number 14. Okay. And changing aims of education. The aims of education in the United States have reflected changing perspectives on education over the years. During colonial times, the overriding aim of education was to enable students to read and understand the Bible, to gain salvation, enter the gates of heaven, and spread the gospel. After the colonies won their independence from England, education objectives such as providing citizens with a common language, attempting to instill a sense of patriotism, developing national feelings of unity and common purpose, provide the technical and agricultural training became important tasks. And I would agree with that. It's interesting, we kind of gotten away from that. You think of that again. This said after that what they were common language, and why I'm finding fault with that, because we now do not emphasize common language. In fact, we're going to have Spanish-speaking schools, language, maintaining your home language, and then attempting to instill a sense of patriotism. And to the point now, it's unpatriotic to display the flag or be proud of the flag because, well, as the president said, it's too divisive to wear the flag. And developed a national feeling of unity and common purpose. And I've never seen our country at a time more divided than it is here in the last 5 years. And provide the technical and agricultural training development our nation needed. And of course, we've kind of abandoned that. So at first we had the Committee of 10 in 1892. And they the committee was established by the NEA, the teachers union, to study the function of the school. The committee, known as Committee of 10, made an effort to set down the purpose of the high school at that time and made the following recommendations. And these 4 things are what you're going to bring in here. And this will be number 14, or 15, number 15. And it was 4 things. And they are numbered here on page 60. And they are this. High school should consist of grades 7 to 12. Courses should be arranged sequentially. Students should be given a few electives in high school, and 1 unit called a Carnegie unit should be awarded for each separate course student takes each year, provided the course meets 4 or 5 times each week. The Committee of 10 also recommended trying to graduate high school students earlier, permit them to attend college sooner. At that time, the recommendation implied that high schools had a college preparatory function. Okay, and they kind of just mentioned this, but this group, that was their thing, how to prepare them for college. Then the 7 cardinal principles, this was, remember this up here, was just in 92, just 8 years later, or, let's see what it was, 1918, I guess it was. Commission on Reorganization of this. So it was, it's interesting, 20 years later, they're going to reorganize. We adopted the Committee of 10's recommendations, and now we're 20 years later, we're going to come up with the 7 cardinal principles, because we're going to we passed another piece of federal legislation, the Reorganization of Secondary Education Act. The cardinal principles of secondary referred to the 7. Okay, and so here are the 7 things here, and that will be your number 16. Those 7 things. Bring those 7 things in here, and here they are. Health, command of fundamental process, worthy home membership, vocation, civic education, worthy use of leisure, and ethical character. It's important that you have ethical character. And then shortly after, we had the 8-year study. Following goals of education and needs of youth were listed in a Progressive Education Association in 1938. So just 20 years later, we had to reorganize it again. It grew out of the 8-year study of schools conducted by this. And they came up with 11 things between 32 and 40. And you get to bring those in here so you have them all. 11 things. Do that. So in 1938, the Education Policies Commission of the National Educational Association set forth purpose of education in American democracy. These objectives stated that students should receive an education in 4 broad areas. And you've got them. There they are. Self-realization, human relations, economic efficiency, and civic responsibility. You don't need to tell them what those are. They're just a mouthful, but it was just interesting. Here we are. This was here, and right away, now we have another statement saying this is the objectives the students should have. And Education for All American Youth, 44, this same commission of the NEA published another statement of educational objective entitled Education for All American Youth. And they had these 5. Equipped to enter an occupation suited to his abilities and offering reasonable opportunities for personal growth. Number 2, prepare him to assume full responsibility of American citizenship. 3, give him a fair chance to exercise his right to the purpose of happiness through the attainment of mental and physical health. Stimulate intellectual curiosity and inner satisfaction. And 5, help develop appreciation of ethical values. And, of course, I'm going to let you bring all of those in right here. And this was number 18, right? Yes. And this one is number 19. The imperative needs of youth. In 1952, we have another statement. And I know I'm kind of poo-pooing this, but we still do this today, and we still have groups together today and come out with these grandiose statements. But here's theirs. They have a bunch of them. And you don't have to do anything with them. Don't have to do that one. Just to be familiar with it. Let's move on to preparation of the teachers, because most present-day teachers have excellent preparation, including at least 4 and often 5 or 8 years of college education. It's difficult to believe that teachers have historically had little or no training. Well, started in the European beginnings. First formal teacher training was in Western world, which we have any record of, was by the King of England. And he wanted this. And then Bingham was granted the request to establish this Gadu House College with a teacher institution in 1439. And this is on the test. Know what that is, because that's on the test, that college, what we're known for. And then we come down here. Teachers in the various kinds of colonial elementary schools typically had only an elementary education themselves. Okay? So early on, But a few had a Latin grammar school or private academy or some more, and because many colonial schools were conducted in connection with a church, the teacher often considered an assistant to the minister because they were religious-based schools and had all these other responsibilities and obligations. And so we're coming to this. Here is teaching manners a good use of classroom time? And again, I'm going to ask you not to comment until you've read both sides, the yes and the no. And I'm going to take you to this and put this up and make a new post for you to comment on. Sorry. Is teaching manners a good use of classroom time? And again, I'm going to put this up. Looks like this now. So you've got 3 of them there. And I'm going to make that number 20. And again, mark it in your notes. Discussion is number 20. Okay. We're talking about the European beginnings. And now we'll say that the colonial teachers in colonial America were very poorly prepared. In fact, more often than not, they received no special training. Single qualification most teach themselves that they had been students. On the other hand, most colonial college teachers provided tutors, Latin or academy teachers that received some kind of college. Okay, so that's what you say here. We're very poorly prepared, little or no training, often just elementary. Teacher indentured servants, and again, one of the first forms of teacher training in the medieval guide system was a young man who wished to enter a certain field of work served lengthy periods of apprenticeship with a master in the field. Some men became teachers by serving as apprentice to master teachers for as long as 7 years, but sometimes kind of used white indentured servants. Okay, and that's I would think offensive because normally you don't think of that, but yes, many people who came to the United States bought passage by agreeing to work for some years. And again, that sounds horrible, but they were escaping an oppressive government. And that's why they were so anxious to get here. And that's still why people are anxious to get here. And what's so interesting is they went down that trail, the other countries, and there's never been a time in history where you see people oppress people. Oppression and trauma in countries comes from government. That's what's so interesting to me, that we'd give so much control to the federal government, is because history tells us that's who oppresses people. But people were so oppressed, they were willing to come here as indentured servants in order to escape where they were and get to this country for the opportunity for freedom of religion, freedom of economics. The ship's captain would then sell the indentured servant services more often than not by placing an ad in the newspaper, similar to what's up here. That's what that is. Records reveal that among early immigrants to this who were advertised and sold as teachers, there were many indentured servants and, get this, convicted felons. And that's another reason they often would leave their country, is to escape their past. In fact, it has been estimated that at least 1/2 of all teachers in colonial America may have come from these sources, meaning indentured or convicted felons. This is not necessarily a derogatory description of these early teachers when we consider that many poor people bought their passage to the colonies by agreeing to serve as indentured servants for a period of years. And that in England at that time, hungry and desperate people could be convicted as felons and deported for simply stealing a loaf of bread. And again, I say to you, who was oppressing these people that they were poor and hungry? The government! Well, that's what's so interesting, that we would turn so much power over to the government when that's the only one in the history that's oppressed people. So we have this, teachers as indentured servants. Can you put a line here and some information about why they were indentured servants from that reading there on page 64. Teaching apprenticeships. Some colonial teachers learned their trade by serving as apprentice to schoolmasters. Court records reveal that numerous such indentures of apprenticeships were this, and here's a little quip about this. You don't have to do that one. And then we started teacher training. One Benjamin Franklin's justification for proposing an academy in Philadelphia was some of the graduates would make good teachers. And of course, he picked the brightest ones. Speculating on the need for such graduates, Franklin wrote this about it. The fact that Franklin had said some of the poorer graduates would make suitable teachers reflects on how low regard for teachers typical of that time. The academy that Franklin proposed was established in 1951 to become teachers. Then normal schools. Many early educators recognized this country's need for a better qualified teachers. However, it wasn't until 1823 that the first teacher training institutions was established. This private school was called a normal school. And again, that's on the test, so you need to know what normal school means after an European prototype which had existed since the 17th century. This was Hall. It did not produce many teachers. It did signal the beginning of formal teacher training. The early normal school program usually consisted of a 2-year course, 2-year program, and you were a teacher. Students typically entered the normal school right after finishing elementary school. Most normal schools did not require high school graduation for the council until 1900. So prior to that, you didn't have to complete high school. You'd finish elementary school and go on to college and study teaching at the normal school. 19th century curriculum was much like the curriculum of high schools at that time. Student viewed subjects in this. And down here I've blocked the subjects offered at normal schools were this: English grammar, English comp, history, geography. I'm not going to read all those, but that's what you're going to put in here, is what they studied. This is number 22. What did they study? And it comes right here off of page 65. This. Even practice teaching. And then here's our friend from last chapter, Horace Mann. He was instrumental in establishing the first state-supported normal school, which opened in 1839 in Lexington, Massachusetts. Other public normal schools established shortly afterwards typically offered a 2-year teacher training program. Some of the students came directly from elementary, others had completed secondary. Some states did not establish state-supported normal schools until the early 1900s. Okay, so here is number 23. I'm going to put it down here, number 23. We have one, there was a state established, they're not called normal schools anymore, but one of the colleges in South Dakota was designated the state normal school. You do a little research and find out which present-day college in the state of South Dakota was the normal school. And it could include private schools. I'll give you a hint. It's not one of the private schools, one of the public schools, but one of the 6 remaining public schools was the normal school. For number 23, you research and find out which one it was and mark it clearly. All right. The state teacher college, in the earlier part of the 20th century, several factors caused significant change in normal schools. For one thing, as the population of the United States increased, so did the enrollment in elementary schools, thereby creating an ever-increasing demand of elementary school teachers. And what happened? Then there was more people in high school. When the high schools got popular, and to meet that demand, the normal schools eventually expanded their curriculum to include secondary programs. And the growth of high schools all created a need for teachers who were highly specialized in their subjects. And that's the difference. Our elementary teachers are supposed to be, their specialty is teaching methods and teaching, and high schools, you're an expert in your subject. And the length of the teacher program expanded from 2, then 3, then finally 4 years. This longer duration fostered development of diversification. The demand for teachers increased from about 20,000 in 1900 to 200,000 in 1930. So think of that growth in just 30 years from 20,000 to 200,000. And let me tell you a quick story. My wife's mom, my mother-in-law, who I met, but she died before I married my wife, she was a 2-year teacher, and she taught kindergarten, and she lived through a time when the requirements in South Dakota changed from 2 years to 4 years. So she spent many a summer getting her 4-year degree after teaching a number of years. She was a kindergarten teacher a number of years, and in that time she got sick. And my wife believed somewhat that she was so driven, she so was afraid to lose her job teaching kindergarten that she ignored some symptoms she had. She eventually died of breast cancer, but she got her 4-year degree and walked across the stage at midlife and got to continue teaching kindergarten students. And so that was a great thing. And she was one that was in this time. The United States gradually advanced technology to the point where college-educated citizens were needed. Normal school responsibilities for that. As normal schools extended their programs of 4 years, began granting baccalaureate degrees. They also began to call themselves state teacher colleges for most institutions, and that took place in the 30s. Where are we at? And normal schools evolved into state teacher colleges because they added so much high school stuff. So put that here for number 24. That was really how they came to be, was to have more advanced specific subject training. And changes in the mid-20th century. Universities entered the teacher prep business at a large scale in 1900. Before then, some graduates... but not until 1900 did the university begin to establish departments of education. Full range of programs. Back that up a little bit. This is the evolution of teacher prep institutions. And you kind of see how it goes. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to clip that for you, if you'll give me a second. And I'm going to import that. Okay. And I'm going to come over here and put this in your page. I'm going to go like this. And now I will put it in here, bring it in the file. And now you'll download this and upload it in yours. And remember how we did that. Save the image as, and then you insert it into your notes. Let me get rid of this. And this will be number 25, and that is importing this in here. Import image. Okay. This is all about state colleges here. And recent trends. Education experienced a major change in a wide variety of perspectives following World War II. As John Dewey George Counts, Will Bagley, Terman, Charters, Terman, other intellectuals. Look at that word. That's how they separate them into intellectuals. I find that word offensive too, to describe some as intellectuals, that they had a different perspective, who had held sway during the first half of the 20th century, yielded to a somewhat less philosophically oriented breed of researchers presented by Maslow, Hevinghurst, Bloom, Gulliford, Konebar, Bruner, these folks, Chomsky, Piaget. The Progressive Educational Association closed its doors, and a series of White House conferences on youth education inaugurated the attempt to improve education. And really, they didn't close their doors. They rebranded itself. Progressive Education rebranded itself to other things because the word progressive was so offensive to people that they rebranded themselves. And then the White House took it over, or the progressives. No school system on earth has been scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected as profoundly and mercilessly as that in the United States. And let me put that in there. And I want you to put this in your notes. No school system on earth has been scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected as profoundly and as mercilessly as that of the United States. And that's right here. And this is number 26. And just take this right from page 66. Bring that in. 40s, the 50s, educational institutions at all levels not only flooded with unprecedented numbers of students, but also censored and flailed mercilessly of self-orientated critics. These frantic rush of stimulus. Public schools were characterized as godless, soft, undisciplined, uncultured, wasteful, disorganized. Critics who remember the high failure rates of the tests given in World II draftees were determined to raise public levels. So it highly criticized, and this, and so then the new emphasis. And again, you don't. This was the new emphasis here of this. Fortunately, although some people were highly critical of the schools, not everybody panicked. There were physical fitness programs, character education projects, general tightening of educational standards, and much more. Gulliford, Torrance, and Gazelle, and others explored the boundaries of creativity. Barr and Ryans carried on enthusiastic studies. There were primarily block programs, integrated groupings, plans devised by and named this. So this, first was the analysis of teaching. Research had been attempted to identify characteristics of teaching styles closely associated with effective instruction. Hundreds of studies that were done. 50s, the focus began what ought to occur in teaching. Ned Flanders, it sounds like a made-up name. Ned Flanders and other researchers developed observational scales for assessing verbal communications between teachers and students. The scale observes categories and summarize actions between the teachers. Time and motion studies. So now, first we studied about how they talked. We talked to them, and then we had time and motion studies. Analyze teacher behaviors. Components of effective teaching. Introduce teacher candidates to the elements judged most important to be good teaching. So we looked at teacher characteristics. It is now possible to assess, this is interesting, it's now possible to assess the logical, verbal, and nonverbal and affective and attitudinal dimensions of instruction through research, as well as intricate aspects of cognitive development. And teacher effectiveness, the past 50 years, research has focused more closely on the instructional patterns. The effective teaching movement is based on the research that offers today's teachers important skills. So that's the biggest thing. We don't put that in words enough for you as pre-service teachers, but teaching methods today should all be based on research-based abilities, research-based methods. Yes, meaning that somebody studied it and found that to be an effective model. And we're going to drive you a little crazy with that in the years to come. I think eventually it'll relax. It's one thing about education and teaching. If you can't see that from this chapter, let me tell it to you straight out. Education is very cyclical in and out. Things are in, then out, then in, then out, then in, then out. And I guarantee that's what this will be. It's a really boom right now. That are what you're doing, is it research based? Is it research approved? And it has a lot of validity to that. But we're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're really hamstringing some effective teachers to do things that they know to work because it's not research based. All right. It talks about what effective teaching is here. The recent emphasis on, I'm down here now, recent emphasis on demonstration, prompting, and practice is far cry from relatively unstructured classrooms of the past. So analysis, teacher effectiveness, and each of these, I'm going to say this is number 27. Just one line, bring one line in for each of those. All right. Then there was studying learning process that talks about you must master certain part of it. They use teachable moments, this cognitive development of Piaget. And so that's number 28 here, Piaget. And he has these cognitive development stages here. So you would go stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Stage 1, semi-motor, preoccupational. And I would make enough notes so you know what this is because it's on the test. 1 to 4. And Bloom here, what was Bloom's things? You've heard of Bloom's taxonomy. Here's Benjamin Bloom, what his thing was, educational objectives. He has 3 things here. And so you bring Bloom in here, number 29. 1 to 3 things in here, so you have it. And Skinner, you know Skinner, his thing was behavioral theory. And so you talk about Skinner here. All right. Then we come back and say, what are the critics saying? Very interesting here. They acknowledge this. Another challenge in education was pointed out to the phalanx of critics, all holding differing perspectives. And it lists those here and what their publication was. Coming of Age in America, Crisis in the Classroom, Death of an Early Age, Deschooling Society, How Earth Fail, A Nation at Risk. All these critics of the educational movements, and there's been tons of them. These critics have not gone unnoticed. Friedenberg's call for alternatives to traditional education, so his endorsement of open education, Kozol's plea of agreement. And again, I wish we could do a whole chapter on what those pendulum swings were that they're talking about. You and all educators need to learn about the multicultural programming. As Kozol and others remind us, we have a good understanding of educational history, can help you do that, of multicultural programming. And I'm going to say to you, I have no idea why that's related. Okay. And major educational events of the past. Okay, I keep doing that to make sure it's working. Move to the 21st century, many people reflect on educational accomplishments in the United States in the past 100 years. As would be expected, perspectives differ. Remember, that was these authors acknowledged at the beginning of the last chapter that perspectives differ on this subject. This Brodinski, an educational journalist, suggests that the GI Bill of Rights should perhaps be considered the single most important education event of the century. And I don't know how you pick the GI Bill. He lists desegregation of schools as second most, and 94-142, Education and Handicapped Act, as the third most important. Interesting. And there's others. Accomplish the trace list would go on. One example of significant progress made by the educational system in the past 75 years is reflecting an increased percentage of students completing high school from 50% in the 40 to 70% in 90. And so you put that here, what happened to the graduation rate. And this would be number 31. that is one accomplishment we have right here on page 70. Then figure 3.3 shows a timeline of yet another efforts that have influenced education over the past half century. It is difficult to draw meaningful inference from recent events that have not yet stood the test of time. And I'm glad they acknowledge that. Meaning, I'll read that to you again, and it's difficult to draw meaningful inference from recent events that have not yet stood the test of time. One of which I'm saying to you is the infusion of technology. I assure you we will come to a point in the future where we say we've went way overboard with the technology. Bring back the chalk and the boards. Bring back the paper and pencils. It's a ways out there, but I'm telling you, as we study the history of education, it's coming. What should be the role of the federal government in education? That's a big one, and you've heard me rant about that, and I think we will see that the feds take more control before less. How can equal education opportunity be achieved in the United States? How professionalized should teachers in the school system be? And I talk about how professionalized is, should teachers be required to be get a master's degree? In the state of New York, you're not a fully certified teacher until you have a master's degree. Did you know that? Here's another one. To what degree should educational policy and practice be influenced by litigation, meaning the courts, the unelected body that get to make rules? How will school reform movements change the practice in education? What will be the expanding and evolving role of technology in our schools? And the answer to these questions, the answers you may have in mind, will be colored the perspective of which people view the world, children, and schools. We believe that viewing all educational questions through well-informed historical perspectives yields more valid effort. So they're saying, these authors saying, study history to come up with these answers. Looking back to look ahead, perspectives on education have changed throughout history. This makes predicting the future of education very difficult. Perhaps even impossible. Somewhat foolhardy rather than attempting to do the best advice. And again, they emphasize knowing and understanding educational history will help us do this better, predict the future. All right. And this, I have clipped this, and I am going to give you this also to download, and this will be your last thing. Put this in your notes. Both of these, put these in your notes. Number 32 image for your study, and I'll quickly bring that in for you so that you can see it. I'm going to go back here under clips, and I'm going to come down below here and put it down here for you. There. You download this and upload it in your notes just as you did this one. There you have it. Perspectives of History, Chapter 3.